54 News, we have a special program coming your way. It is not something that is normally discussed, but we have felt that it is time some light is shown on one of the issues that rocks the entire world. Tonight, we will be discussing sexual assault around the world. We here at Channel 54 News feel it is important to recognize and help the individuals who have suffered in the dark. It is time to remove the stigma from sexual assault and show victims that it can happen to anyone. The stigma is present all around the world. Victims are blamed for what they wear and what they say. Alcohol is seemingly a big factor, but the blaming of women for provocative clothing or claims that they gave consent are also prevalent. In many cases, it is not considered rape if the victim is unable to give consent. If it is not a yes, it is not consent. Many rapes and instances of sexual assault are not reported because they fear judgment and exclusion from society. In many cultures around the world, people will marry their attackers just to not live with the stigma associated with sexual assault. Even being raped by your significant other is still rape. All around the world, people are living in silence and fear, and on tonight's programming, we are going to transport you all around the world to show you how relevant sexual assault is in the world today. First, we will discuss sexual assault on known land. To Maya with sexual assault in Western culture.
Thanks, Summer. This is Maya reporting sexual assault in Western countries. First stop, Sweden.
Sweden, the rape capital of the West, has been taking in refugees for years now, but in 2015 the influx had reached its peak. Of all the countries in Europe, Sweden takes in the most refugees per capita. Countries like the USA have banned immigration from certain countries, such as Iraq, due to concerns of terrorism and such, but Sweden doesn't seem to be concerned by that. The country provides shelter to Iraqis, Balkans, and Somalis, among others, but what people have seen over the years is an increase in crime rate after these refugees have been let in. 40 years after the Swedish parliament decided to let refugees in, violent crime has risen 300% and rapes by 1,472% as of 2014. These statistics have placed Sweden at the second country in the world when it comes to rape occurrence, behind Lesotho in South Africa. Sweden is not the only country to be negatively affected by their decisions to take in refugees. Denmark has been impacted greatly as well. A survey done in 2012 shows that 60 to 79% of women in France, Germany, and Finland say that they have been sexually assaulted. In Sweden and Denmark, that percentage rises to 80 to 100% of women. A Europe-wide survey given in 2014 shows that 1 in 10 have experienced sexual assault by an adult before they were 15. 1 in 10 women have experienced sexual abuse since the age of 15, though 1 in 20 was raped. And of all the women that said that they have been raped by their current partner, 31% said that there were at least 6 instances. And lastly, only 22% of women report abuse from their partner. In North America, not many perpetrators are jailed for more than a year or two, but stories can often be seen over the news. Last year, a swimmer from Stanford spent 6 months in prison after raping a woman behind a dumpster. His sentence was lessened because he was a good kid and the punishment would ruin his chance at a successful life. Similarly, there are 2 football players who were caught sending pictures around an assault of an unconscious teenage girl. These boys were sentenced for 1 and 2 years and apologized to the victim and her family for only taking the pictures. There are many stories that can be found concerning sexual assault and rape in the U.S., but what about the statistics? According to RAINN, the rate of sexual assault is slowly falling in the U.S., but every 98 seconds an American is assaulted, and it is estimated that of all the rapes, 3% of men, or 1 in every 33, has experienced an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime, making that 9 out of every 10 rape victims is a woman. 55% of rapes take place near or at the victim's home, and 10% in an enclosed public area like a parking lot or garage, and 8% on school property. That's all for sexual assault in Western cultures. Now to Summer Lavin with sexual assault in Latin America.
Hello, this is Summer Lavin reporting on the occurrences of sexual assault in Latin America. In 2013, it has been reported that Bolivia had the highest rates of both sexual and physical violence against women throughout Latin America. The reports state that approximately 53% of all women in Bolivia have been victims of these crimes. It is believed that these staggering numbers are caused by a cultural concept that women are property of men. The court systems do not favor victims because of this belief. This idea has plagued the minds of Bolivians and led to abnormal rates of sexual assault as well as abuse and even femicide. This issue has not only been affecting Bolivian society, but the entirety of Latin America. One woman in Honduras states that she had been raped by over a dozen gang members and began receiving death threats directed to her family after reporting it. Survivors of these crimes in Honduras only have a choice of 3 shelters to take cover in, but 2/3 of them work as brothels. The remaining shelter cannot provide safety from these gangs, leading this woman to be denied access. This led her no other option but to flee the country. Many young girls attempt to flee from these countries where they are not protected from sexual assault, but 60% end up suffering from it on their journey towards America, their only hope for freedom. And now to be reporting about South Asia.
Thanks, Summer. I'm going to be reporting on sexual assault in India.
Sexual assault in India is almost to be expected. It's something so normal in society that most people can't think of a life where it doesn't exist. You have young medical students gang raped to death on public buses, and 17-year-old girls who have the courage to report their rape to be shunned by police. They try to get her to marry one of her assailants because she had her virginity taken and nobody would want to marry her now. She feels so alone that she ends her young life. In 2014 alone, there were 36,000 cases of reported sexual assault. On public buses and on the street, you have massive amounts of women claiming they were groped. You have pictures and CCTV footage of it, but police deny it happening. When a 7-year-old boy was asked why the boys in his class weren't sitting with the girls, he answered, "The girls are inferior to us. Why should we sit with them?" How can you expect a stigma to be ended if you don't teach men and young boys to respect women?
Something else that we're going to talk about is sexual assault in men, because that doesn't get as much attention as it should.
Sexual assault in men is an issue that isn't spoken about. Whether it be male on male or female on male, it's a major issue that doesn't get attention. It's almost impossible to find any information on sexual assault in men in Western countries, let alone in other ones. This is assumed to be because of the stigma that men are stronger and cannot be taken advantage of. Men don't say anything for fear they'll be bullied or accused of being gay. Women on men rape is different. Only 9% of them have claimed to be physically restrained. Usually women use less violent means. Things like repeated touching, mental or emotional manipulation, intoxication, and in rare occasions violence are used to coerce men. They're dealing with an issue in a system that isn't set up to protect them.
And now over to Sherry, who's...
Thanks, Bree, and now we're going to discuss sexual assault in Africa.
Here today to discuss the prevalence of sexual assault in Africa. When we hear sexual assault, many people usually think of rape, but in Africa the case is different. Although rape is prevalent in Africa, I would like to discuss how female circumcision has turned into genital mutilation, which can endanger the lives of its patients. Many stories about sexual assault in Africa are about being raped during war, but that is because genital mutilation is not viewed as a form of assault. In many instances of rape, some have tried to report it to the police, but there is not much being done about it. The most disgusting part of this assault is that most victims are children under the age of 16 years old. But why is the age so low? It's because many female children are circumcised at extremely young ages. Instead of explaining the horrific event to you, I'm going to tell you a story of a woman who survived. She remembers being very young when she was circumcised. At first she was excited to join womanhood like many of her siblings and neighbors have already. But the night before the ceremony, her sister told her that it hurt so bad she could not walk for days. The very next day she told her mother that she was no longer wishing to be circumcised. But her mother told her that if she was not circumcised, no man will ever marry her. Although she was still not convinced, a village elder came into her home and held her down. Her mother and her father pinned her arms and legs, and then the elder began to rip her privates apart using an old, rinsed-off razor blade. As a pool of blood began to accumulate around her, she began to scream in pain. The only remedy for pain was a couple of leaves that were thought to have medicinal purposes. Once the elder stopped cutting, she was sewn up. This is a terrible story, but it happens all the time. There are many myths told by elders in countries like this in order to scare young children into agreeing to get circumcised. There are many consequences that come along with this kind of genital mutilation, the most common one being HIV. I think one of the worst things about this is the fact that it is not always rape among civilians. Even people who are supposed to be helping these people take advantage of these poor women. There have even been stories of UN soldiers raping young girls. And aside from genital mutilation, there's also the issue of breast ironing in Africa, where young girls' breasts and chest are ironed with hot tools with the intention of trying to stop sexual assault by stopping the development of breasts. Breast ironing can start as early as 8 years old, and there are many different ways to do it. One of the most common kinds is an elastic band that is tied around the breast of a child and then tightened at night for a very long time. I think it is time that we stop altering women, stop telling them what to wear, and instead we start teaching people how to not rape.
That is our program for tonight. We hope you've learned something new and now give more thought to the problems that hide in the shadows. It's up to us to stop this growing issue. The first step is to educate. We need to educate about what consent is. We feel like the meaning of consent has been blurred, and that's why people get raped when they're drunk, unable to consent, or raped by their spouses. Rape and sexual assault have become cultural. In poorer countries that are more patriarchal, women are viewed as less. This becomes an issue because they're treated like property, and when there are no laws to protect people, nothing can be done. We need to make sure there are laws and that they're enforced. We need to educate these cultures on human rights, but it's not just in developing countries where there are loopholes in the law about it. In many privileged countries like America, sexual assault against men is viewed as non-existent sometimes. Many women also lack the education to know when something is rape, so they falsely accuse men. Many people know that the court will favor women due to the fact that women are the majority of victims. This cannot continue to happen. There has to be an equality within all the men and women all over the world when it comes to the law. Everyone is human and deserves to have basic rights, and this is why it is so important for us to educate our children.